Good afternoon and welcome to Hot Issues on TV3. So we are less than 20 days to election 2016 and already many of you are worried. You've asked that question, are we safe? Are we sure we're going to have a violent-free election, particularly following what happened last week Sunday at the residence of the flag bearer of the NPP, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo? This afternoon, we explore the security challenges ahead of us, even as we prepare for election 2016. I am Winston Amwa, and when we return from this short break, I'll introduce my guest for this afternoon, who knows much about the country's security and whether there are any challenges facing us by way of security ahead of the 2016 elections. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back from that short break and thanks for staying with us. This episode of Hot Issues is supported by 3FM and Star Ghana. Star Ghana strengthening transparency, accountability and responsiveness in Ghana through transformational national development and accountable public services for all Ghanaians. Now, my guest for this afternoon is one person who knows a lot when it comes to the country's security. He's one person who done a lot of research about Ghana's security and of course knows what it means by way of security implications ahead of election 2016. Now he is currently the Director of Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. My guest for this afternoon is Dr. Kwesi Aning. Good afternoon and thank you very much for joining. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Well, I'm good. I can't complain.
Yeah. So, what are the biggest security threats facing us ahead of election 2016?
Well, I would still say it's our use and abuse of language, the hate speech, the intimidating language, the abusive language that creates a certain subconsciousness that the use of violence is legitimate and is acceptable in our political discourse.
Beyond that intemperate language, what else could be facing us?
Well, I think one other thing that we need to be conscious of relates to the levels of preparedness of the National Election Security Task Force. And there are several components to this.
Okay.
We have a little over 29,000 polling stations, of which 7,023 are either hotspots or flashpoints. Now, the figures themselves don't tell a story until we look at the similar figures for 2012. In 2012, we had just about a little over 3,000 hotspots. And for this year, we have about 7,023. That is a little over 100% increase in the number of flashpoints. Now, if we look at the factual numbers of uniformed men and women who should please this 29,000, then we are stretching ourselves fairly thin in terms of our ability to adequately guard and secure the elections.
Are we prepared?
There's a level of preparedness, but part of that level of preparedness is also a challenge that I consistently throw out to ordinary citizens of this country. Were we even to have adequate men and logistics, as citizens we have a responsibility not to allow ourselves to be used and to be pushed in particular directions. And that is where I think you mentioned Sunday's unfortunate incidents, and I would like to speak to it very briefly.
Okay, speak to it briefly.
I think Sunday's incident encapsulates the question that you've asked me. And there's weaknesses that we saw first in the delayed police response, the failure of intelligence to understand that congregating in such a sensitive spot potentially could lead to violence.
Why do you call that a failure?
Because any threat assessment relating to election 2016 ought to have demonstrated to those who were on the ground at Nima Police Station that when you have two competing parties in which one group congregates before the opposition leader's house or another critical contender, and we know how we do our politics.
Okay.
Emotional, a little bit of shouting, shoving and pushing, that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell us that it's only a matter of time before something happens. So that failure to anticipate what could happen, that failure to proactively intervene and prevent the escalation, raises fundamental questions about the levels of police preparedness if we cast our minds back to what happened in Donkokrom and the failure to provide emergency response and emergency backup. But not only that, I've spoken to the police consistently since Monday morning and raised my concerns about the ability to assure this country that they have the intelligence right, they have the backup right, and that the emergency response as we approach 2016 election will be improved.
Were they able to assure you that they have that response?
Well, they claim they are investigating.
They claim they're investigating. But were you assured listening to them that they have everything in place to do so?
Well, I'll give them another day or two before I'll start, trying to fire on all cylinders.
You're talking about the professionalism of the police. Yes, go ahead.
So, where I'd reached was that another aspect of what worries me about the Sunday incident was the role that guns played in it. I think there were one or two individuals who used pump action guns. Yeah. I think we know their faces.
I told one person use a pump action gun. Yeah.
So I think it's important in my conversations with the police that we get answers around the registration, who has that registration license, and whether the person who used it was trained, to reassure the public that as we head towards December 7th, that the intelligence is working well, they are on top of the situation, and that together with the judiciary, they will deal with those who foment any trouble.
Yes, but assurance is one thing and trusting the police is another thing. Can we trust the police?
I think trust resides presently in terms of the performance over the last 12 months in a very small place. And I'm happy that you've used the word trust. Trust is the fulcrum around which institutional relations, together with those that they serve, revolve around. Trust is the glue that allows us to have this conversation, and off camera, I will share information with you, and you can say, Kwesi, please don't use this information. Trust is what allows us, even when the police tells us that, look, we are well equipped, we have control, we have knowledge about where the hotspots are and who individuals who might want to foment trouble are. Trust is what allows us to believe that we as individuals or groups of individuals should not go after those that we think will foment trouble because the police will deliver. Unfortunately, there have been a few instances where the performance and the behavior of those who under Act 350 of 1970 should protect our lives and property have not performed as optimally as possible. If we take Ododo Diodio, for example, that happened prior before Sunday, and there were knives involved, physical violence, arrests were made, people were bailed super quick, and we haven't heard any information as to what is happening. And prior to that also, quite a number of other instances of violence had happened. So when all these things pile up, it creates a fundamental issue of trust between those who have to provide the security for us and the protection, and those of us who are recipients of that service.
Okay, so do you sense that Ghanaians do not trust the police?
I think were we to take a pool right now, probably less than 40% of Ghanaians will trust the police, yes.
Less than 40% of
Less than
Ghanaians
40%, particularly relating to their performance with respect to the elections, yes.
And how would that affect the security that we're enjoying prior to the elections?
Well, I mean, my hope is that the continuous suggestions about how to improve performance will ginger them to win the trust that they once had. But it's not just about the police service per se as an institution that is struggling to win trust. I think we cannot talk about the Ghana Police Service without also talking about the excessive, intimidating, intrusive behavior of the political elite in this country. That across this country, from district levels to ordinary village police stations, everyone who feels he or she is politically connected intimidates the police. And I think part of the challenge that we are facing, and once more revolving around the use of your word trust, is that it's undermined institutional cohesion, it's undermined their professional self-confidence, because they don't know. And as you travel around this country, you know it yourself. Everyone in a four-wheel drive with flashing lights doesn't stop at a police barrier. The ordinary policeman is afraid because they've seen colleagues who have been punished, demoted, transferred, because they've only done their job. I think we know the famous case of a minister who was eating while driving.
Yeah.
And what happened to the poor policemen who did their job. In other jurisdictions, that minister would have resigned. Here is the police officer who did his job, or the police officers who did their jobs, who were punished. Okay, so when these intrusive behavior over time are not checked, officers lose their self-confidence, they are afraid of acting, and they basically weigh their choices. Where do I think I'm best protected and I'm best secure? And that is what has resolved in what we are experiencing.
And wouldn't
right
this
now.
lead people to, then think of protecting themselves?
Well, I think in a certain sense, yes. We cannot overlook the fact that when those who are enjoined by law to provide security fail to do so, ordinary people then form all kinds of groups to protect themselves. But that is not right. That is even more dangerous, because it leads to an escalation in the proliferation of guns. It leads to undue violence in society. And you know as much as I do that when you have a gun in your house, you think, okay, that anybody who crosses you, you deal with the person. So my argument is very simple, and my admonition is very simple. Let's not use the inability of the police to optimally protect us to go get guns. No, that is not the solution at all.
Why isn't that a solution? If they're unable to protect us, then you would have to protect yourself then.
Well, but not with guns.
So what do you protect yourselves with?
Well, I mean, there are very little things. I mean, if communities come together, if communities trust each other, if communities share information and intelligence, there are basic little things that we can do. If you remember, post the Côte d'Ivoire crisis and post the terrorist attacks in Côte d'Ivoire, when we were told to be mindful of who comes into our community, there was a certain sense of Ghanaianness and a drive to protect and secure ourselves, that people willingly went to the police and said, oh, there are groups of itinerant preachers, there are new people in our towns. And if you remember, the police managed to pick up quite a few people. And I think people should go back and to say, how do we provide community information? Once more to the police, once more to the BNI, or to the chief, so that together we can provide that basic fundamental security that we all need.
But looking at vigilante groups, why are we unable to deal with this?
Because they are politically connected.
Connected to who?
Well, the book makes it very clear that the 16 major political vigilante groups in this country are connected to the two big political parties. But it's not just the issue of vigilantism that is, worrisome. It is the franchising and the export of the idea that being politically connected and being violent provides you with protection. And that is where the danger is. It is not the actual performance of violent acts by these vigilante groups, although they do so. But it is the sowing of fear in the communities where they reside, that if you cross the line, these guys will deal with you. And it is that fear element that is much more dangerous.
That's taking the law into their own hands. They're not supposed to be doing so.
Oh, far from it. But they are politically connected, and they get protected.
Protected by who?
By the political class. So let's say somebody...
So that's the political class intimidating us?
That's the political class intimidating us, yes. That's the bottom line.
For what gains?
Well, violence, particularly during elections, is gold in the bank, in the political bank. Okay, so that if you are a member of a political vigilante group and you get your job done correctly, post the election, if your party wins, you will get a job to do. And if you remember, both in 2009 and 2013, vigilante group members who thought they had not been rewarded enough drove DCs out of their offices and homes, seized public toilets. I never knew that public toilets had such value. Seized lorry parks to collect their dues. So political vigilantism and the violence that follows thereof has a currency. But that is at the lower level. At the much higher level, that currency transforms into cabinet positions, into DCs, MCs, members of boards. So we shouldn't understand the violence as just an irrational set of actions. No, there's a rational kind of madness to the violence that we see. So there's a positive correlation between the use of hate speech, actual violence, threatening, intimidating behavior, abusive behavior, and then if your party wins, that is the middle variable, then your chances of getting a top job is very high.
So these two major political parties are the ones undermining our security.
Yes, by their actions and in actions. Yes.
But looking at this, I mean, yes, the police is supposed to do so. Beyond the political interference, why is the police unable to curb this menace?
Last week, when the Inspector General of Police was at the launch of my book, he made it very clear, that vigilantism is illegal, that he had met all political parties who had assured him, and I think there's some communique to that extent, that they don't have any of these vigilante groups anymore. And I think that once more reflects the four, what I call tongues with which our political class speaks. The first tongue is when they meet President-elect Donald Trump and Prime Minister May, speak mellifluous Oxbridge English, behave very nicely, use all the appropriate terminologies and words about political inclusiveness, the rule of law, human rights, economic development, the role of the private sector. The second tongue is when they speak to you and I. When you bring them here, they speak fairly decently. The third is when they are in a room where they think there are no mics and televisions and nobody is recording them. And we've heard a couple of times when people have said, have recorded them, and the kinds of things that they say. The fourth and the most dangerous is the body language and the deafening silence when their members flout the law or when their members do things that are not right. Politics is about shared values, shared norms, and shared principles. If you take the two major political parties and their manifestos, there's nothing in it that talks about violence. There's nothing in it that talks about intimidating people or using hate speech. What is it then that prevents them from disciplining their members who behave in ways that not only threatens the four of us in this room, but denigrates the dignity of the Ghanaian?
Tell me, why do you think they're unable to do so?
Because it's political currency. They don't really mind, because those who behave in that way create a platform that helps them possibly to win an election. And the winning itself is an end in itself. Providing social welfare goods become tangential to winning that.
So we can
election.
distance the politicians from these violent acts.
Oh, far from it, no. I think the violent acts must be placed squarely at the leadership of all the political parties. Because in most jurisdictions, if you flout the rules, if you bring the reputation of the party in disrepute, you are kicked out within minutes. Here, they are cocooned, they are given governmental positions, and they are given the juiciest jobs when their party wins. So we cannot dissociate the violence that we see from the political leadership of all the political parties.
And not only the NPP and NDC.
Oh dear, no.
Well, the PNC and CPP are also engaged in these things.
Well, I mean, they don't have enough clout. And I think most of us focus on the two very big parties. But if you remember, post-tenancy, quite a number of the smaller parties also signaled that where similar tenancy type violence to take place, they also have the ability to form vigilante groups. So we need to find a way of bringing closure to this violence. And I think the statement last night by our two international partners, the UK and the US governments, painful though they are, sends a clear signal.
Why, first of all, why is it painful? Why is it a painful statement?
60 years of independence, you want somebody to threaten you that I'll bring your daughters from my private schools. When you are sick, you won't go to enjoy my medical facilities. I will shut down your bank accounts. A major sanctions regime, you won't fly on my airplanes before you draw back and behave.
Didn't we ask for it?
Oh, we've been begging for it. And I think they themselves have also waited way too long. This ought to have come probably 9 months ago. They've seen the escalation of this violence, and I think, Sunday basically just epitomized for them and demonstrated clearly that if we don't step in, this dear old friend of ours might go down.
But how does that solve the problem? Yes, they've come out to say, we won't allow you in. How does that solve the problem?
Well, it doesn't solve the problem per se, but my suspicion is that it will send a signal to the leaders that were you not to control your team and things were to happen, you yourself can't run away. Your children that you stashed somewhere will be brought back to join the inferno. We know where your family members are. They will come back. Look, a sanctions regime is not just about travel ban. It's about access to health, bank accounts, your children's education. It's an all-encompassing regime that basically strips them bare and says, you are just like the people that you've encouraged to fight. So I think it's helpful and supports the work that the National Peace Council, CDD, IDEG, KIPTC, CODIO, the Christian Council of Churches, the Imam's Office, it buttresses that single desire by Ghanaians to say, look, we want peace and we want a peaceful election that forms a platform upon which we can develop this country.
All right, so just hold on for me. We'll go for a short break now. My guest this afternoon hot issue is Dr. Kwesi Aning of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. We're talking about, election-related violence ahead of election 2016. Stay with us. When we return from the break, we'll focus more on, the message or the warning from the US and UK. And then we'll also find out more. Beyond these two warnings, what else can we do to ensure that you and I have a free and fair general elections? Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the break, and thanks for staying with us. Hot Issues is supported by 3FM 92.7 and Star Ghana. Star Ghana, strengthening transparency, accountability, and responsiveness through transformational national development and accountable public services for all Ghanaians. All right, so my guest this afternoon is Dr. Kwesi Aning, who is Director of the Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. yes, so the US has warned us, yes, the UK has warned us, but how will that deter the ordinary man on the street from engaging in these acts?
Well, if the earlier conversation we've been having, placing the violence at the doorsteps of the leadership and their unwillingness or incapability or incapacity to stop it, then the warning is clear. It is your mobilization and your language that encourages the ordinary person to commit the crime. If you don't stop it, we will punish you. And the signal has been given, and I'm sure the message will filter down. Not only that, when you become a successful politician post December 7th, and you need to drink tea with the US ambassador or with President Buhari, you don't want the riffraffs who put you into power stabbing people and breaking people's heads around you. So what we are going to see is that though earlier on the levels of violence was such that it was tolerable, okay, our partners didn't see the need for this public utterance. And you know, I know that they've been talking privately. You know, when they meet for dinners and cocktails, their conversations. But to actually have this, you know, intrusive intervention just shows how worried they are. And I don't think this is a statement that has only been drawn up in Accra by the High Commission and the Embassy. I think this has been discussed at a much higher level based on the intelligence that they have, either relating to arms flows and the storing up of arms. Of course, the statements or the rhetoric has been quite disturbing. You know, so for our own political leaders, particularly the leaders of the two parties, this is a very clear statement that we are not happy with the way things are going. You've got to pull back your attack dogs, and you've got to make sure that you have an election that is reflective of the Ghanaian identity or the Ghanaian psyche. You know, we like to talk, we are a little bit loud sometimes, but it doesn't degenerate into what we are seeing now. And I think certainly my original assessments Sunday and Monday until these two American statements, the American and the UK statement, was that we would see copycat attacks around the country and we will see retaliatory behavior. I think with these two statements, the messages will go out that, look, please pull back from the brink. Okay. So generally, I would say it's quite unfortunate that after 60 years of independence, somebody has to tell us, oh, please do behave well, let me slap you a little bit on the wrist, and then I hope that you'll be very good boys and very good girls. So that is quite unfortunate.
Okay.
But in the long term, in terms of the interest of 25 million Ghanaians, that will contribute to strengthening the voices of rationality and reason in this country, and hopefully we will have a peaceful election.
But apart from these two statements, what else should we do in resolving the threats facing us?
Well, I think we've spoken about the more sort of logistic related structural issues. What I want to focus on is what, as ordinary people, we can do. What do we do between now on that day and immediately after? And once more is the issue of language.
Okay.
When we tell people, go out there and police the pool, we are not telling people to go and act the police officer. It's just go out there, be vigilant. When you are giving your ballot paper, does it have all the right number of names, symbols, whatever it is? Has it been stamped at the back and signed, making it a valid document? And then you do it, affix your thumbprint, drop it in the box. Secondly, don't mail around. It is the concentration of people who are emotionally charged that day, thinking that they have a superior right to watch over other people's behavior. That generates the conversations politely at first. That gets increasingly heated, and that spills into something else. More often than not, that violence will not be related to the actual act of voting. It may be related to underlying tensions that may have been there for years. And this is where I'm grateful to the Ghana Police Service. The 7,023 polling stations that they have identified as hotspots, each of them, they've also identified what the underlying triggers are unconnected to the election itself. So there are places where an underlying reason, tension, might be related to land.
Okay.
Chieftaincy. Two big families quarreling over identity issues. But they've been able to isolate the specificities of what can trigger violence. And it is that excellent work by the Ghana Police Service that I think all of us will have to use as a basis for proactive prevention. So as ordinary citizens, there are loads of things that we can do to ensure that things don't get out of hand. But basically, our advice is simple. Stay calm, vote, go home, visit a friend, visit family members, go back to your office if it's near your office where you voted and you didn't go back to your town. Around 4:45, come out there, hopefully come with a lantern or some lamp, so that in case something happens and the lights go off, you can switch it on within the next second. Because once more, I want to use your great word, trust. All of us have a responsibility to ensure that where lights to go off that night, we have these powerful lamps that can be switched on within 1/100th of a second. Because the level of trust within the whole process resides once more at a very small place. It is crucial that at every single polling station, there are no contestations about how the counting is done, and there are no contestations about the actual numbers. Okay. Because thanks to social media, were there to be a little misunderstanding here that escalates into violence, within 2 minutes, it will be spread all over the country. So what is crucial for all of us is that we don't spread false audio, we don't spread false videos, we don't spread false text. It is incumbent on us as citizens to have a grander national vision, a vision that says we want to contribute to this election, make it peaceful, and then on the 8th of December, continue with our daily business.
Okay, so let's look at the Electoral Commission now.
Yes.
I mean, so far, looking at the processes of the Electoral Commission, how would you assess them?
Well, it's been tough. They've also got to work hard to secure people's trust.
Are there trust issues with the Electoral Commission also?
Well, I think there are trust issues, yes.
What are those issues?
Well, first, the 12 or 13 parties that were disqualified, I think we all got to know a specific number of issues that were related to their forms. And then post the Supreme Court, I think we had this escalation in the numbers.
Yeah.
And one wonders, when did they themselves find out that it wasn't 1, 2, or 3, but suddenly 105 and 300 and something? Institutions do matter, but the way institutions behave relates or has trust issues. So that's number one. Number two, I think, was the unfortunate statement that I think Ayarga would not have won. Post-Trump, you can't say that. The third one.
But Dr. Kwesi Aning, he had 20,000 votes in the last elections with the PNC.
Yeah.
He then splits to form the APC.
Yeah.
Come on, he's not going to win the elections.
That is not the purview of a neutral arbiter or or an institution that should be a neutral arbiter and its boss to say things like that. I cannot, before my PhD student defends or comes to the viva, say that that student has passed or has failed, because there are 3 or 4 people who will be at that viva, and that student has to convince them. The third issue relates to, if the votes are too tight, I will order a recount.
What's wrong with that?
What is the legal justification for that? For the
Tell me.
Constitution? I don't know, but I don't think there's any constitutional justification for that. And as an individual, I don't think that institution is mandated to order that. You know, so there are 2 things, or there are several things with trust. You can behave in a manner that is legally right, or that you are mandated to do, but you've got to always weigh that within the context of what is good for the generality of the people that you want to serve. And when those statements or interventions are made that are then reversed or are not found to be right and are critiqued, that's institutional importance. People begin to raise questions around it.
Do you trust the Electoral Commission?
I do. But these are transitional problems. I think you also know that the Electoral Commission, as part of its work to reduce tensions at polling stations, I think has added more than 5,000 extra polling stations to
about 3,000 more.
Yeah, about 3,000 more. Okay, so it gets certain things right, for which we are happy. It gets certain things less right, for which we make suggestions. But I think that is what institutional resilience is about.
But if after all these things you trust them, then we don't have an issue. We're good to go, aren't we?
Yeah, but that's why it's important for us to talk about it. Were we just to say, oh, well, they've said this, they've done that, and therefore we won't speak about it.
Some are scared the things we say could actually lead to problems. The way we criticize and we chastise the Electoral Commission could form the basis for some, election-related violence when the results are declared.
That does not come from the chastisement. It comes from an assessment of their performance and behavior.
So far, by assessing their performance and behavior, could someone be right and say, I wouldn't trust the results of coming from the Electoral Commission?
I think it's important for the Electoral Commission, particularly relating to the printing of those parliamentary ballots, the ones in Kumasi, in which the NPP claims that their acronym ought to have been under their logo. I mean, there's a bit of back and forth now. I don't think we have a video of the conversation that they have, nor the audio. Now, and it comes back once more to trust and how institutional behavior must serve the larger interest of the people or the nation that it seeks to serve. What is the best thing that ought to be done now?
Tell me, what's the best thing to be done?
Well, let's buy the bullet and go look for the money and print new ballot papers.
The Electoral Commission should print new ballot papers.
Well, if the NPP is saying that they didn't accept or they would accept those ones, that is a recipe for some tension, isn't it?
The Electoral Commission says, you told us.
Where's the evidence? You see, what is the end result that we are looking for?
Tell me.
I told you. You are telling me I didn't tell you. What we want is an election in which there is consensus, first about the process, the results, and then whoever becomes His Excellency the President or Her Excellency the President. I think there's one woman who's
There's one woman in there,
yeah,
yes.
good. We don't want a situation where there are contentions from one party and there's no evidence as to who is telling the truth. And because we are looking at a major party, I think it's useful and important that that extra couple of hundreds of thousands of dollars or a couple of millions, that is a cheaper price to pay reprinting those papers than the contention about, well, this doesn't represent my party and therefore
What if we don't have the money?
We must look for the money.
We must look for the money.
Under all circumstances, yes. We must look for the money and print. Because if you look that is, if what I've seen online is right, every single party has the logo and then the initials or the acronyms either under it or on top of the logo.
Because they say those parties' logos come with an acronym. The NPP's logo doesn't come with an acronym. In fact, in their dealings, official dealings with the Electoral Commission, there is New Patriotic Party, NPP Development and Freedom, and Moto Development and Freedom. And so during the printing, the AC argues that the NPP was there, they saw everything. They do not understand why that has become an issue.
My appeal is that we are all desperate for a peaceful election. There are more than enough tensions already.
Even if somebody is seemingly twisting the arms of the Electoral Commission to do their bidding?
Don't we all make mistakes? I'm hoping that this conversation will not be, or this misunderstanding will not be carried out in public, but we can find a solution to it as quickly as possible. But whatever it is, I don't want a situation where any single party can be given an excuse to raise concerns about the validity of the process, the vote itself, and the result.
What danger could that pose?
Well, post the Supreme Court judgment and post the Anas video that we've all celebrated, a couple of things have happened. Post the Supreme Court judgment, quite disturbing statements have been made that we will not go to the Supreme Court. Furthermore, statements have been made to the extent or to the end that we will declare our own results. When Anas brought his video, we all celebrated. It was a great piece of investigative journalism. But I think it also raised concerns about the neutrality or otherwise of the judiciary. I think post the video, the judiciary has done quite well in regaining our trust. And I think leaderships and paneling of these 17 judges to deal with the cases, I think has contributed to, deepening the trust and respect that we have for the judiciary. So it's important that we don't give any one party the opportunity to create any problems. We have more than enough. And if it's a matter of renegotiating around this, looking for the money to get it done for the greater good of this nation and for our peace, I think it's important that we do it.
Well, we definitely would come back to this particular issue, since you say it's very important that we do this for the sake of the peace that we enjoy in this country. But hey, we need to go for a short break. When we return, we definitely will continue this conversation right here on Hot Issues on TV3 with me, Winston Amor. All right, so welcome back from that short break, and thanks for staying with us. This is Hot Issues on TV3 and supported by 3FM 92.7 right here in Accra, and also supported by Star Ghana, strengthening transparency, accountability, and responsiveness through transformational national development and accountable public services for all Ghanaians. So we're talking about, security challenges facing us ahead of election 2016. And this afternoon I've been joined by Dr. Kwesi Aning, who is head of academic affairs and research of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. He knows a lot about security. He's a security analyst. So finally on this bit about, printing new ballot papers. If the Electoral Commission refuses to do so, what happens?
Well, I think the ancillary question then will be, what does this party that feels wronged do?
What would they do?
I don't know. I'm not a member of the party.
Exactly.
But were they to say, well, there seems to be a misunderstanding here and therefore we will not take part, then it poses quite a headache. My appeal to both parties is to say, what do we do best that secures all of us, in which all the contending parties feel that they've been given a fair opportunity and a fair chance. My understanding of the role, the institutional role and efficacy of the EC is really not to say you can be part, you can be part. No. It's to say, look, this is the playing field. We will make it as level as possible so that if in the process someone comes back and says, look, probably there was an oversight, where does the national interest lie in all this? Where the national interest lies is that before, during, and post the date, we have a peaceful, integrated, calm country in which we all can live and grow our development. I don't think it serves our collective interest for any one major group to feel that it has not been given a fair hearing and a fair opportunity. But it raises, as you correctly said earlier on, how did that symbol look on previous ballots since 1992?
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, probably it's Dr. Akweto or Professor Jimabwede who can answer this question because they are more experts.
I'm trying to recollect myself. I mean, I've voted since, but I'm trying to recollect how that one actually looked in previous elections. I still can't get the picture in my mind.
Because I think it's important for us to have the history. So probably post this, we all need to go and look for old ballot papers and to see how they look like. You see, because even if what has been printed today is what was printed earlier on, for the sake of our unity and our peace, if they want the acronyms there, let's go borrow.
So, for the sake of our peace, anything the political parties want, the Electoral Commission should do it.
For the sake of our collective peace, within the bounds of reason and within the confines of the law, it will be proper for it to be considered very carefully.
Some could hold the Electoral Commission to ransom.
No one. No single
Keep
group.
making requests.
We are reasonable people. We must be reasonable people. You can't continue to make unreasonable requests. Don't forget that as you make those requests are in the public domain. And politicians need public sympathy and public buy-in to what their parties are doing. So you cannot continue to make any one party supposedly unreasonable demands, because by making unreasonable demands, you put the same peace that we are all arguing about also in jeopardy. So I think there is a trade-off here. I think we've got to say, how do we discuss this and come out with a solution that becomes a win-win game for all of us? And I think what we are all looking for is a win-win game. Okay? What does it mean if X wins or Y wins? All we are looking for is that there's peace, there's enough stability, development come, there are jobs. Probably I don't think you would mind were you to be given an extra 1,500 pay rise. I certainly wouldn't mind.
Of course I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, you know, so I think we are all looking for improved social welfare gains. You know, so it's crucial and important, I think, in this last 20 days, that as we make demands and we raise objections or suggestions, that they are looked at within the broader prism of what the national interest is and how best we can secure this peace and grow this country.
Do you get the sense that the opposition parties doubt, you know, the independence and fairness of the Electoral Commission?
Well, I think we need to disaggregate political talk in an electoral season from post the electoral season. I think the political rhetoric is always heightened, and opposition parties, even when they've been in government before, always doubt their own security services. They doubt the Electoral Commission, they doubt the national broadcaster, they doubt everything that they don't control. That is the nature of opposition politics.
Is that not indicative of what they did when they're in power?
Probably. But the good thing about institutions, and that is why for me I like the word resilience, you can, I mean, we spoke about the way the IGP has rather unacceptably and degradingly been abused by a senior opposition party. But were they to win, you see, that man who has been abused and degraded is the man who will be riding to inspect the troops. Would they apologize? And that is why, for me, our language and the use and abuse of words is the most crucial threat to this democracy. You cannot degrade and denigrate individuals who run the most critical institutions. You can be in disagreement with the way they run the institutions. You can be in disagreement with the way that they perform their functions. But you cannot denigrate their dignity in a manner that raises concerns about the function and effectiveness of that institution. And I think, once more, in talking about the violence, these are things that political parties and their leaders must step away from and say, we don't accept this kind of behavior. Because the person of the chair of the Electoral Commission has also been denigrated, only for us to know 2 months later, oh, but I was only joking.
Yeah.
Okay, when we do that, we trample upon our dignity as Ghanaians. And let's not forget, when the US and the UK representatives bring out the statements they brought out last night, it means they know the psyche of those who behave in different ways. And how do you think you go and sit across them from the negotiating table a couple of months from now? Because they have your psychological profile. They know the things that you said. So they will smile at you. Money is sensitive, but I'll give you my money. So political parties and their leaders have a crucial, important role in disciplining their followers and in sending a clear signal to all of us that politics is about values, it's about norms, and it's about principles. Running down the Inspector General of Police because probably some of his men have failed to deliver the kind of protection that we all wanted, and to have prevented certain instances does not solve the issue.
In all of this, what should the media do differently to ensure that the peace that we enjoy is not jeopardized?
Well, I think there's a certain race for breaking news. There's a certain race for ratings. There's a certain race for viewership. And I think, unfortunately, the entertainment part, of the shows and who can say what raises hairs is becoming more important than the content itself. So I think it's important that the way you've grilled me today, and you've pushed me nearly over the edge. If quite a lot of your compatriots will actually know the issues for which their guest is talking about. Because there's a certain tendency in this country for the guest to be giving a free run of the show. What he or she says is what is right. That is not what this must be a critical conversation in which you push me to the edge, and of course I will push back. Okay, so the media, precisely because, and as we spoke before, you travel around this country, everywhere people go, on the farms, they have their transistor radios and they are listening. Because your voice goes far, let's try to use this medium as a platform that brings about unity, that brings about a better sense of being Ghanaian, and support the national integration process.
And finally, what should civil society do?
We should continue to play the watchdog role, critical but neutral, and a consistent engagement with those who want to govern us.
Dr. Kwesi Aning, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so that's Dr. Kwesi Aning, a security analyst, joining us this afternoon on Hot Issues right here on TV3. I am Winston Amwa. Hope you enjoy the show. Make sure you make a date with that same time next week, Saturday. But this program was supported by 3FM 92.7 in Accra, and then Star Ghana strengthening transparency, accountability, and responsiveness through transformational national development and accountable public services for all Ghanaians. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye for now.